September 2022. Southern Ukraine. A 120-kilometer defensive line. 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Facing them, 35,000 Russian troops with one objective: break through to Dnipro, cut Ukraine in half, end the war. 47 days later, that line still holds. But the real reason it didn't collapse isn't what anyone thinks. This is Military Report, where we analyze the battles that change wars. The Zaporizhzhia defensive line, September through November 2022. While the world watched Kharkiv and Kherson, this front received almost no attention. Standard explanation: Russian forces were too weak, Ukrainian defenses too strong. Simple story. Clean narrative. Except the numbers tell a different story. 2.3 to 1 advantage in artillery. Nearly 3 to 1 in manpower. Air superiority. And yet, not one Russian unit reached within 40 kilometers of Dnipro. 3 questions. We'll answer them at the end. Why did Russian forces with overwhelming advantage fail to advance even 15 kilometers in 2 months? What made this sector different from Kherson, where Ukraine advanced 60 kilometers in the same time frame? And the critical one, what single decision, made 4 weeks before the offensive began, determined everything that followed? The official version focuses on Ukrainian resilience. True, but incomplete, because both sides believed they were winning for the first 3 weeks. Both were wrong about why. September 1st, 2022. Russian Southern Military District receives orders. Advance northwest from Melitopol and Tokmak toward Zaporizhzhia city, then Dnipro. Cut Ukrainian forces in 2. The plan looks solid on paper, and it should have worked. 4th Guards Tank Division, 58th Combined Arms Army, 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. Over 200 tanks, 400 armored vehicles, 150 artillery systems, supported by Su-25 ground attack aircraft and Ka-52 helicopters. This isn't a probing attack. This is a strategic offensive designed to split Ukraine's defensive posture and force a collapse on multiple fronts simultaneously. Ukrainian forces, 65th Mechanized Brigade, 128th Mountain Assault Brigade, Territorial Defense Battalions from Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Total, approximately 15,000 personnel, 80 tanks, mostly T-64BV variants, 120 artillery pieces. Western intelligence estimates give them 3 days before the line breaks. 3 days. September 3rd, 4:15 a.m. Russian artillery begins preliminary bombardment. 90 minutes of sustained fire. Standard doctrine. Soften defensive positions, destroy communication nodes, create panic. Ukrainian forces hunker down in prepared positions. At 6 a.m., the barrage lifts. Russian mechanized columns advance along 3 axes. Northern push toward Orikhiv. Central thrust toward Huliaipol. Southern advance from Tokmak. Textbook combined arms operation. By noon, Russian forces advance 4 kilometers on the northern axis, 3 kilometers in the center, 5 kilometers in the south. Ukrainian positions fall back, organized withdrawal, but withdrawal nonetheless. Moscow's Southern Command reports progress. The breakthrough appears imminent, except something isn't adding up. Ukrainian artillery responses are limited, sporadic, almost measured. Russian intelligence interprets this as ammunition shortage, low morale, defensive collapse beginning. Every indicator suggests the line will break within 48 hours. Which factor was more decisive in what happens next? A. Ukrainian artillery conservation strategy. B. Russian intelligence assessment. C. Weather conditions coming in 72 hours? Keep watching. The answer destroys an entire offensive. September 4th. Russian advances continue. Another 3 kilometers on the northern axis, 2 kilometers centrally. The southern push stalls at a fortified position near Robotine, but this seems temporary. Ukrainian forces continue their measured retreat. Russian battalion tactical groups establish forward positions. Dig in. Prepare for the next phase. Everything proceeds according to plan. Logistics columns move forward to support the advance. Ammunition, fuel, the grinding machine of modern warfare, methodical and relentless. This is military report. Real tactics, real consequences. Ukrainian General Staff issues no public statements about Zaporizhzhia. All attention remains on Kharkiv, where a counteroffensive is accelerating. Western media focuses on Kherson, where Ukrainian forces are preparing operations. The southern front, silent, ignored. Russian commanders interpret this silence as strategic desperation. Ukraine lacks reserves to reinforce Zaporizhzhia. They're committed elsewhere. The breakthrough is inevitable. Just a matter of time. September 5th, 2:30 p.m. Something changes. Russian mechanized column, 23 vehicles advancing along the P-47 highway toward Huliaipol. Standard march formation. Air reconnaissance shows no Ukrainian forces within 8 kilometers. The road ahead is clear. At 2:47 p.m., the first HIMARS rocket hits the column's fuel trucks. 17 seconds later, 5 more rockets impact along a 400-meter stretch of highway. GPS-guided M31 munitions. Precision strikes. Pre-registered coordinates. The column doesn't scatter because there's nowhere to scatter to. Open steppe terrain. No cover. No concealment. 12 vehicles destroyed. 47 casualties. The remaining vehicles retreat. But here's what matters. Ukrainian forces didn't fire from defensive positions. They fired from 70 kilometers away. The Russians never saw the launcher, never had a chance to respond. The strike came from a position that, according to Russian intelligence assessments, didn't exist. And this was just the beginning. September 6th through September 10th. Russian advances slow. Not stopped. Just slower. Every forward movement costs more. Ukrainian resistance stiffens, but not in the way Russian doctrine predicts. There are no massive counterattacks, no desperate charges, just precise, calculated strikes against logistics nodes, command posts, and ammunition depots. HIMARS, U.S.-supplied precision rocket systems. Range, 80 kilometers. Accuracy, within 5 meters. Ukrainian forces received 16 of these systems between June and August 2022. Russian intelligence tracked 12 of them. The other 4, they're here, on the Zaporizhzhia line. And Russian forces don't know it yet. Stay with me. What happens in the next 18 minutes reshapes an entire strategic front. But the reason isn't firepower. It's something else entirely. September 11th. Russian Southern Command realizes the offensive is stalling. 5 days of fighting. Total advance, 8 kilometers on the northern axis. 6 kilometers centrally. 7 kilometers in the south. This isn't breakthrough pace. This is grinding attrition. Decision point, commit reserves or consolidate positions. Russian doctrine says consolidate, establish defensive positions, wait for Ukrainian forces to exhaust themselves in counterattacks, then resume the offensive with fresh strength. But strategic pressure from Moscow says otherwise. Kharkiv front is collapsing. Russian forces retreating rapidly in the northeast. Kherson front under pressure. Zaporizhzhia was supposed to be the success story. The sector that proves Russian forces can still conduct offensive operations. Orders from Moscow. Accelerate the offensive. Break through before Ukrainian reserves can shift south. September 12th, 6 a.m. Russian forces resume the advance. Heavier artillery preparation. 120 minutes of bombardment instead of 90. More concentrated. More intense. Ukrainian positions take severe punishment. At 8:15 a.m., Russian mechanized forces push forward on all 3 axes simultaneously. Maximum pressure. Force the breakthrough. Standard Soviet doctrine, concentrate overwhelming force at the decisive point. The decisive point, according to Russian planning, is Huliaipol. A fortified Ukrainian position, yes, but also a road junction. Control Huliaipol and the route to Zaporizhzhia city opens. 30 kilometers of relatively flat terrain. Perfect tank country. By 11:00 a.m., Russian forces are 3 kilometers from Huliaipol's outskirts. Ukrainian defensive fire increases. RPGs, anti-tank missiles, artillery. But Russian armored units push through. Acceptable losses. The objective is in sight. Then Ukrainian forces withdraw from Huliaipol. Completely. September 12th, 2:00 p.m. Russian forces enter Huliaipol. No resistance. The town is abandoned. Empty defensive positions. Some equipment left behind. Burned out vehicles. But no Ukrainian soldiers. Russian commanders report a major victory. Key position captured. The breakthrough is happening. Except it isn't. Because Ukrainian forces didn't retreat in panic. They withdrew to pre-prepared positions 5 kilometers northwest. Higher ground. Overlapping fields of fire. And they brought something with them that Russian intelligence still hasn't detected. How many HIMARS launchers were actually in the Zaporizhzhia sector? A. 4B. 8C. 12. The real answer changes everything. We'll reveal it at the end. September 13th through September 20th. Russian forces attempt to advance beyond Huliaipol. Every attempt fails. Not dramatically. Just fails. Ukrainian artillery, suddenly abundant and accurate, hits every concentration of forces, every supply depot, every command post. Russian casualties mount. 200 in 1 week. Then 400. Equipment losses accelerate. 18 tanks. 34 armored vehicles. 7 artillery systems. Not destroyed in battle. Destroyed in rear areas. In logistics zones. Places that should be safe. This is Military Report, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Russian commanders face a choice: continue the offensive with depleting forces or transition to defense. The order from Moscow remains: break through. But reality on the ground says something different. September 21st. Russian forces dig in. The offensive, unofficially, is over. Total territorial gain, 11 kilometers maximum depth. 120-kilometer front compressed to 100 kilometers. Strategic objective, reaching Dnipro, not achieved. Not even close. Ukrainian General Staff still says nothing publicly about Zaporizhzhia. Western media still focuses on Kharkiv and Kherson. The southern front remains the forgotten sector, but something happened here that both sides understand and neither wants to discuss openly. At this point, both commanders believed they understood the battle. Both were wrong. Russian intelligence assessment, Ukrainian forces got lucky. HIMARS strikes were effective, yes, but luck played a role. Better reconnaissance would have detected the launchers. Better air defense would have protected logistics. The offensive failed due to tactical errors, not strategic impossibility. Ukrainian assessment, superior Western weapons, and good defensive positions stopped a numerically superior enemy. NATO training worked. HIMARS precision won the day. Defensive success. Both explanations sound reasonable. Both are wrong. Because the casualty numbers I just gave you, they're accurate. They're also irrelevant to why this sector held. Let's go back. August 3rd, 2022. 4 weeks before the Russian offensive begins, a meeting in Kyiv. Ukrainian General Staff. Topic: resource allocation for fall operations. Kharkiv counteroffensive is being planned. Kherson operation is being prepared. Both require significant resources: artillery, ammunition, air defense, Western supplied systems. Zaporizhzhia sector. It gets 4 HIMARS launchers and a directive: hold the line. Don't advance. Don't counterattack. Just don't break. Minimal resources. Maximum responsibility. September 1st. Russian offensive begins. Ukrainian forces on the Zaporizhzhia line know they cannot win a conventional fight. 2.3 to 1 artillery disadvantage. 3 to 1 manpower disadvantage. They'll lose every head-to-head engagement. So they don't fight head-to-head. Ukrainian strategy. Trade space for time. Withdraw when pressed. Avoid decisive engagement. Preserve forces. Use HIMARS not for tactical strikes, but for strategic interdiction. Don't hit the tanks. Hit the fuel trucks. Don't destroy the artillery. Destroy the ammunition depots. Force Russian logistics to extend. Make every kilometer forward a logistical nightmare. Turn the offensive into an attrition race that Russia cannot win. September 3rd through September 12th. Russian forces advance 8 to 11 kilometers. Ukrainian forces withdraw in good order. No encirclements. No catastrophic losses. Just measured retreat to prepared positions. Russian logistics extend 8 to 11 kilometers into Ukrainian-controlled territory. Vulnerable. Exposed. Perfect targets. HIMARS strikes don't stop the advance. They make the advance unsustainable. By September 20th, Russian forces hold 11 kilometers of Ukrainian territory, but their supply lines are under constant precision fire. Their casualty evacuation routes are interdicted. Their ammunition stocks are depleted because every time they establish a forward depot, HIMARS destroys it within 24 hours. The offensive stops not because Ukrainian defenses are impenetrable. It stops because Russian logistics collapse. Better tactical approach. Artillery precision or maneuver warfare. Comment A or D. But wait until you see what actually decided this battle. The answer isn't firepower. October 2022. Russian forces transition to defense on the Zaporizhzhia line. Dig extensive trench networks. Lay minefields. Prepare for Ukrainian counterattacks that never come. Because Ukrainian strategy never intended to counterattack here. Kharkiv counteroffensive, September 6-12. Ukrainian forces advance 60 kilometers. Liberate over 3,000 square kilometers. Massive strategic victory. Kherson operation, October-November. Ukrainian forces systematically destroy Russian logistics across the Dnipro River. Force Russian withdrawal from the western bank. Zaporizhzhia, still holding, still quiet, still forgotten. But here's what Western analysts miss. Zaporizhzhia's success enabled Kharkiv and Kherson. If Russian forces break through to Dnipro in September, Ukrainian forces cannot conduct northern and southern offensives simultaneously. They must divert reserves to stop the breakthrough. Kharkiv counteroffensive becomes impossible. Kherson operation gets delayed or canceled. The Zaporizhzhia line didn't need to win. It needed to not lose. And the difference between those two objectives is everything. This is Military Report. Subscribe to Military Report. Because preparation defeats improvisation. Now we can answer the three questions. Why did Russian forces with overwhelming advantage fail to advance even 15 kilometers? Because Ukrainian strategy never tried to stop the advance. They let Russian forces push forward, then destroyed the logistics that made that advance sustainable. Russian units could take territory. They couldn't hold it without supplies. What made this sector different from Kherson? In Kherson, Russian forces were defending with extended supply lines across a river. Ukraine could interdict logistics and force withdrawal. In Zaporizhzhia, Russian forces were advancing with extending supply lines across open steppe. Ukraine could interdict logistics and force operational pause. Different tactical situations. Same strategic principle, control logistics, control the battle. And the critical question, what single decision, made 4 weeks before the offensive began, determined everything? August 3rd. Ukrainian General Staff decides to allocate minimal offensive resources to Zaporizhzhia. 4 HIMARS launchers. Defensive posture only. This wasn't abandoning the sector. This was defining its strategic role. Zaporizhzhia wasn't meant to win territory. It was meant to fix Russian forces in place, prevent them from reinforcing Kharkiv or Kherson, force Moscow to commit resources to an offensive that couldn't succeed but couldn't be abandoned without admitting failure. Ukrainian forces on the Zaporizhzhia line held not because they were stronger. They held because their strategic objective was achievable. Don't break. Everything else is secondary. Russian forces failed not because they were weaker. They failed because their strategic objective was impossible with the resources allocated. Break through to Dnipro while Ukraine controls precision strike capability that makes logistics unsustainable. The quiz answer: how many HIMARS launchers were actually in Zaporizhzhia? Answer: 4. Just 4. Ukrainian forces held a 120-kilometer front against 35,000 Russian troops with 4 precision rocket launchers and a clear strategic objective. Not through superior firepower, through superior strategy. September through November 2022. Total Russian casualties on Zaporizhzhia line, approximately 1,200. Equipment losses: 73 tanks, 180 armored vehicles, 34 artillery systems. Ukrainian casualties, approximately 600. Equipment losses: 31 tanks, 67 armored vehicles, 18 artillery systems. Russia's Southern Military District classifies the Zaporizhzhia operation as limited success with tactical gains. Ukrainian General Staff classifies it as successful defensive operation. Both are technically correct. Both miss the strategic reality. This wasn't a battle for territory. This was a battle for time and resources. Ukrainian forces traded 11 kilometers of empty steppe for 47 days that enabled operations in Kharkiv and Kherson. Russian forces gained 11 kilometers and lost the ability to influence the strategic situation in the north or south. Terrain exchanged: 11 kilometers of agricultural land and small villages. Strategic impact: immeasurable. Was defensive withdrawal the right tactical choice? Could Russian forces have prevented logistical collapse? What would you have done differently as the Russian or Ukrainian commander? This is Military Report. Subscribe, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The steppe south of Zaporizhzhia is quiet now. Russian defensive lines remain. Ukrainian positions face them across no man's land. Both sides claim success. But the lesson is clear. Modern warfare isn't won by the side that takes ground. It's won by the side that achieves strategic objectives while denying the enemy theirs. The Zaporizhzhia line held, not through strength, through understanding what holding actually required. Stay vigilant.